Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. We are back. I'm Kevin Roberts, starting with Taylor Smith as usual. We've been away for the holiday, and also I was sick for a while. But finally, we're back to discuss NBA DFS. We're going to break down today's slate for Thursday. I believe it's a 6-game slate. Pretty nice slate. Yesterday's pricing at DraftKings was disgusting. So hopefully you found a way to win. Anyways, I have been pushing out shorts for NBA DFS and also NFL DFS. So I'll keep cranking those out, but we are glad to be back to do a regular show. If you like videos like this and they help you out in any way, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to be alerted to more videos just like this. The way we do this is we go by position, looking at ownership and matchups and projections, and look at the top plays of the day and let you know what we're going to do and the plays that we like in particular. So let's get into it. By the way, we are using Taylor's coined projections. There is going to be a slight difference between these and what you'll see elsewhere, just because it's Taylor's special spin on how he views the slate. And I will say, just a reminder, if you use these a week ago or so, Taylor loved Jimmy Butler. It was just cranking up a major projection for Jimmy Butler, and others projection tools were not on Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler ended up getting 89 fantasy points. So another reason to follow along and also follow along with our advice in general. All right, man, let's get to it. Let's start at point guard. Up top is SGA with the best projection among fantasy point guards with 52 fantasy points, going up against the Clippers. Clippers got completely destroyed by the Spurs in their last game, and now James Harden is questionable, so that is obviously less than ideal. In theory, SGA at 10.9K, he is priced just about right. The projection is good. The matchup is not ideal. It's not the most amazing matchup. I don't really personally think SGA is the way to go on the slate, but he's by far the best looking point guard. What are you thinking about him?
Yeah, I was just looking through my exposures and don't have them at all. I ran 500 lineups. I didn't do any rules or anything, but not a good spot for him. Clippers against guards in general. They have good wing defenders to throw his way, a lot of length. It's SGA, of course, he can spout off against anybody, but there's enough else to spend up for on this slate. We'll get to the Lakers. We'll get to some of the other stuff. Philadelphia, perhaps. Boston's on the slate. So not getting a lot of him right now. I think there are other cheaper guys you can just play with plenty of confidence. There's a lot of value in particular, like cheap value at point guard that looks pretty good. So really just paying up elsewhere, not getting to SGA.
Yeah, it's also a Giannis slate. So just right off the top, I'm just going to pay $500 more for Giannis, and that's going to be the way I start my lineups. Like if you have to play a stud, it's just not SGA for me on the slate. Now, worth noting, he has been very, very good. 40 plus real points in 3 of his last 5 games. He's averaging 52 fantasy points per game on the year, averaging 60 fantasy points per game across 2 meetings with the Clippers, despite the not so great matchup. But, as we were talking about before we jumped in here, if Harden is indeed out, I mean, look at what the Clippers did against the Spurs. That was with Harden. If they don't have Harden here, pretty likely SGA does not see 4 full quarters. So that's another thing to deter me a little bit. Plus his prices come up slightly. So he's a fine play. It's SGA. He can crush. He can nuke the slate. It's just not somebody I feel like we have to go out of our way to pay for. All right. So like you said, there are other guys here, and they're all pretty nicely priced, especially compared to SGA. Tyrese Maxey coming in with a 45-point fantasy projection. His matchup against the Warriors is not amazing. Plus Joel Embiid should be back after resting last night. And then you just do have the presence of PG-13 as well. I think Maxey's okay. I just don't think it's a priority. And honestly, I don't see anybody up top that I feel like I have to go pay for. I feel like I'd rather go pay for Giannis. I'd rather go pay for one of the Lakers studs that you alluded to. So I think if I had to pay, I'm probably looking at maybe Maxey, but nobody really calls to me up top at point guard tonight.
Yeah, I think Maxey's pretty good. I don't mind him on this slate. 42 minutes last night in a game that they blew. He's been pretty much the same guy regardless of Embiid. So like Embiid's status doesn't really change my opinion about Maxey. He's a good play either way. He's getting a little bit more expensive, 8-8 now. Paul George looks like it's going to be chalk on this slate, and Maxey is not. So if you want natural leverage, just fading George and playing Maxey instead makes sense to me. Or Embiid, assuming he's in. I might set a rule to not get Maxey and George together, but I would, you're going to get a lot of George that way. Just kind of set a cap on your exposure to him and get some Maxey. I think it's a good way to play this slate. I don't mind Hero. I think he looks okay. The matchup against Indiana is decent. They're not quite the matchup they were last year when we were kind of streaming everybody against the Pacers, but Hero's fine. Not very exciting. Ditto for Curry if he's in. Austin Reeves is 7-2. The Lakers do have AD as questionable. Actually, right as I said that, AD came in as doubtful.
Oh,
so Austin
that's
Reeves
something.
now going to be pretty chalky, I would think. Gabe Vincent also doubtful. So that's another body out of the rotation. I think Shake Milton was questionable. Is that what I saw earlier?
Oh, that's a game changer.
Well, he's a rotation guard, I guess. But
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
10
so
minutes
AD being
debut,
doubtful is going to change everything with this. Austin Reeves is going to be, he's expensive at 7-2, but he's going to get a ton of usage and ball handling. Obviously, no D'Angelo Russell either. So the role for him was already a pretty good one. He's probably a priority now at 7-2.
Yeah, I'd say so. He's had a triple-double on Christmas Day. He's been pushing for that in each of his last 2 games. He's had 58-plus fantasy points in all 3 of those games. Basically, ever since D'Lo's been shipped out of town, he's been money. He's been crazy good. And now with Brow almost certainly out, he looks like a core play. That would probably take the ownership down for PG-13, which makes him look a little bit more appealing now at 7K flat. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But yeah, Reeves looks really, really good. I'm going to be, whatever the ownership ends up being, I will be at where the field's at or way over, just because I liked him anyways. 7.2 was too cheap for who he had become. The role was just getting to be very, very massive. Basically, they want to turn him into an all-star and just see if he can be a crucial piece to them possibly becoming a title contender. And it's working out to a certain degree so far. So, the Hero with Jimmy Butler back, I'm less interested in Hero. I think the price for who he's become is fine. But him, Jimmy, and Bam are all kind of priced up to the point where I don't feel like that is a must. But now looking at point guard, the presence of Reeves with the Anthony Davis news just makes it even less of a priority to pay up at this position. So Reeves is probably going to be as high as I go at point guard at this point. And then we're looking at, LeBron now, obviously at 9.9 looks like one of the best studs. And for me, it's probably just going to come down to, do I save, 1.5K and pay and go get LeBron as my stud? And even though he's going to be chalky, or do I still go up and get Giannis? That's going to be probably my key decision point on this slate. There's a lot of value too at point guard. Even Anthony Simons looks good at 6.5K. That looks like now a full game to target. It's very stackable. The Lakers game in general, Lakers are not very good defensively. It's got a 223 total. I would not be shocked at all if that game stayed close. You do have a former Laker in D'Lo smashed last night in his Nets debut, his second Nets debut. 5.2K looks like a pretty good price, especially with Ben Simmons out. So he looks good. He should play 30 plus minutes off the bench, might even get the start. So at 5.2K, he looks like one of the best values on the slate. As far as other value, Jaylen Brown's questionable, so Peyton Pritchard could look better than he already does at 6K. He's always in play. His prices come up a little bit. I would definitely need Jaylen Brown out to be really, really into that price. Derek White would look good at 7.1K if Jaylen Brown is out. And if you want more value, Kason Wallace is popping. And we mentioned if James Harden is out, KPJ and Chris Dunn would look pretty darn good, even with the blowout risk.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't play Chris Dunn just because, I think he's an okay play if Harden's in. I don't think he gets a big role boost if Harden's out. KPJ would look a lot better. Bones Highland would probably enter the rotation and be viable in that scenario, like a really good per minute guy. So I'd actually be pretty excited about him, just given the blowout rate. Also not hurt at all. Kason Wallace, I'm a little bit nervous about. Just not a good per minute guy, very low floor, but he's cheap. He's played 30 plus in 3 games in a row. So I think it's fine. Not even a good matchup, but he's still popping like crazy for the dollar. So if you're looking for a punt, I think he's good. Simons is fine. Shaden Sharp under 6K looks really good to me. Scoot Henderson under 5K looks really good to me. They've kind of extended him a little bit. in some recent games. His playing time depends on how he's playing. So if he's playing poorly, he can play 20 minutes. If he's playing well, though, he can play 30-ish. So willing to lean into that. I think he's a really good tournament play at 4,700 on DK. Yeah, D'Lo 5-2, like that's cheap. There's a lot of risk for that with Brooklyn on a back-to-back and huge underdogs against Milwaukee. But, for the role he's going to play here, it's not the same role he had in LA. He's going to be free to gun off the bench. They don't have a lot. He's not playing with LeBron or AD anymore. So he can kind of take the reins of that offense if he wants to, even in a bench role. It's kind of a salary thing. Like he's just so cheap that I think you can just lean into that and play him.
Yeah, he projects decently. And also if he does, like if he starts, I think he looks obviously even better, even with the blowout risk. But if he doesn't start, he's kind of blowout proof coming off the bench. And he's just going to have more usage. So no matter how you look at it, he's going to be a high usage guy, cheap. And I think he's a pretty good play as things stand. And obviously, I think safer than these Clippers guys in like case on walls and stuff. Obviously, a little bit more expensive, but he just feels a little bit more palatable than those guys do. All right, over to shooting guard we go. Leading the way is Anthony Edwards, who forever doesn't look good, even though he should. Every time we talk about him, we marvel at his low price, but he just never really crushes. And now he gets the Celtics. So, I mean, if Minnesota's going to stay close, Anthony Edwards probably needs to go off, right? So at 8.4K, it is a low price for who he can be. The matchup's terrible. Don't really expect it to be that good of a game. But, I think for tournaments, he's not going to be owned, and he does have a ceiling. So I don't think he's the worst tournament play, especially if somebody like Maxey in that price range carries ownership. But for me, really, I would just rather save 1.4K and go get Paul George, or save 1.2K and get Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves isn't a shooting guard, but it's just in that price range. There's also Norm Powell, who is cheaper, Derek White, who is cheaper. Those guys just all look better. And then in that same price range is Jaylen Brown if he is in, and then Tyler Hero. Again, I prefer those 7K guys over all three of those dudes.
Yeah, I like Norman Powell a bit. He's going to look better in theory if Harden's out. Like he's just going to get all the usage. Question is whether they can keep that game close, though. Obviously, I'm skeptical. It's pretty much a max price Norm Powell, so I don't love it, but he does look good. He has guard forward, so that comes in handy. I think Paul George is probably overprojected. Just when Embiid is in the lineup, he's deferring. We saw him defer when he played with James Harden and Kawhi Leonard last season. He's just kind of not the kind of guy who's going to take over and just be the guy if he's playing with other stars, and he's happy to take a backseat role. I understand it's cheap. 7K is probably the cheapest he's ever been, but I don't know. I feel like there's not really a ceiling there. We've seen in the recent games with Embiid in, he's getting like mid-30s and stuff, which is okay, but you're not winning anything with a 30 score from very popular Paul George. We don't have Embiid's status, so if Embiid is out again for whatever reason, I would have a lot more interest, but I kind of want to be under this. The ownership's going to be there. I'm not sure what you're winning if Paul George goes off at 29 to 30% ownership at 7K flat. So I'm kind of willing to bank on him just not being the guy, because the sites are going to base it based on who he's been in the past. This season with Embiid and Maxey, he's averaging like 1.08 points per minute, which is good, but I don't think he offers the ceiling that he did before with other roles that he's had on other teams. So not psyched about it. I prefer to be under on him. These OKC guys, Dort and Wallace, are okay punts. Schroeder, if Curry's out, it's going to look better. He's been pretty horrible, though, since he got to Golden State. I'm not sure what you're missing by fading Schroeder, but he's okay enough value. And then, Sharp and Kamara for Portland, two more values that grade out pretty well.
Yeah, I'm starting to come around to your approach on PG-13 here, just because if you do look at those games with Embiid and PG-13 is very much deferring. It really, going into Slate, it was just a price play. 7K feels too cheap for Paul George, and then he reminded us of what he can be last night with 49 fantasy points. If Embiid is out, he is too cheap, and he's a core play for me. But if Embiid is in, I think I'm right there with you, and I would be underweight. And honestly, with Austin Reeves there at only $200 more, and Norm Powell at $300 more, those guys feel like better plays with more upside on this slate for sure.
Obviously, and maybe Austin the ownership Reeves comes down. Like Reeves is going to eat a lot. Different position, but people are paying that range for Reeves instead of George now. So maybe it gets a little more interesting if he's low owned. But again, I'm not sure what ceiling you're getting if Embiid is in.
Yeah, I think even ownership aside, I'm definitely going to be playing Reeves over Paul George. And just for those reasons you said, I think I would be underweight unless Embiid is out. If Embiid is out, I have no problem pairing Paul George with Austin Reeves on this slate. At shooting guard, a lot of these guys we already touched on. Obviously, D'Lo remains a really good value at 5.2. Dennis Schroeder looks appealing. I think people are going to fall into a trap there. He just has not been very productive with the Warriors. Obviously, that can change at any point. And at 5K, he is a good price for a starter. He's going to get up 30 plus minutes. I just think it feels trappy. Like he just has not been, getting there yet. That could change, but I think I'm going to stay away. Most of the other value looks kind of the same as to what we were talking about. I guess Tyrese Martin at 3.5K could be a punt if he starts. But like you said, big spread in the Bucks Nets game. So probably just D'Lo or nothing for me on the Brooklyn side. Not seeing anybody else at shooting guard that I feel like I have to get to. Only other guy I'll mention is Shadon Sharp at 5.8K. I do like that Blazers-Lakers game a lot. So if anybody there is going to go a little bit overlooked, I will have interest, and he is one of them.
I think Middleton's worth a look. He played 31 minutes in the last game, so not really on a strict cap anymore. 6'7's getting up there, but good matchup. He's good per minute still. I don't think he's a guy you can fade. I think you should have him in your player pool at least.
Yeah, I don't mind keeping him in my player pool. 6.7 is getting a little bit rich. I do like that he played 31 minutes. And by the way, I think you alluded to this last time we talked about the Bucks and Chris Middleton. He's been hyper involved. Even when he's only playing 23 to 26 minutes, he's still getting up 15 shots. His usage rate is very, very good. So I don't really like to play an expensive Middleton with any kind of cap, and with Giannis and Dame both there, but I would not eliminate him either. I think that's a good call. You see anybody else at shooting guard? You want to move along to small forward?
Let's move along.
All right, here we go. So up top is Jason Tatum, who tends to only save his bad games for when I buy in. I'm always like, no Tatum, no Tatum, no Tatum. And then the second I play Jason Tatum, what does he do? Let's see. What was this game he had the other day? I guess it wasn't even that bad in the end. 40 fantasy points, but that's his worst game of the year almost. He has one other game in his entire game log under 40 fantasy points. So he saved his second worst game of the year for me. Also, awesome times. I'm sure anybody who went along with that was really excited. But that said, he comes in with a pretty good projection at 49 fantasy points. Probably going to get overlooked now that Brow is probably going to be out, and you have Giannis, you have SGA, and you have LeBron James looking like pretty interesting studs up top. And the matchup with Minnesota on the road is not super friendly. I don't think Tatum's a priority. I just will mention him because basically whenever you're not on Tatum, he tends to just decide to erupt, and he's probably not going to be very owned. 3.4K cheaper is Paul George, who we've talked about. Worth noting, Tatum's upside could be substantial if Jaylen Brown misses, so there is that. But once again, there is value to be had down low. You have Cam Johnson at 7.5K, going to have monster usage with no Ben Simmons there. And then you have Norm Powell, who we talked about, and Paul George. And for value, one of the best plays on the slate is going to be Denny Avdia, who's going to be looking at quite a nice role with no Jeremy Grant here. He'd already been heating up, and he's only 5.7K and a good matchup with the Lakers. So at power forward, I guess he's small forward eligible as well. But at forward in general, he's one of my favorite plays of the entire slate.
Yeah, he might be the chalkiest player on the entire slate, but I think that's fine. Chalk in NBA is generally pretty good. No qualms with that. Otherwise, it's mostly the same stuff, like Powell, Dort, Paul George, Middleton, Andrew Wiggins maybe is okay. The thing about Cam Johnson is they now have Cam Thomas and D'Lo there, so he's not really playing that same role he had when Cam Thomas was out injured. So not really going to pay for him, but I think, Powell, Middleton, guys like that are fine.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that Cam came back. Would he come back just last night?
I'm not sure. I haven't played.
Yeah. So last night he played 25 minutes. It's his first game back in a month. Not crazy to imagine he does not play on the second leg of a back-to-back. Just keep an eye out for that. Tough to say for sure because the Nets already ruled two guys out, Ben Simmons being one of them. But just keep an eye on it because he did play his first game back in a month last night. And I would imagine even if he does play, he'd be limited. I still think Cam Johnson is a little bit interesting just because he's going to continue to have usage with no Ben Simmons and Cam Thomas either limited or out. But yeah, good call. I mean, if Cam Thomas is there, Cam Johnson looks worse by default. Down low, Rui Hachimura, 5.3K. Obviously, no brow. He's going to look good. I have no problem with that. He's going to carry some ownership, probably not currently, but he probably will. Not sure if we touched on Lou Dort. Don't really love the matchup, but 4.2K for a guy who's going to play 30 plus minutes. I don't hate that. Not sure I see anything else that I'm really, I feel like I have to go do, but that's probably it. Rui looks good at that price. Worth wondering if he's going to be an interesting pivot away from Denny or if he's also going to be chalky, but I don't really care. Like you said, that feels like good chalk, especially Denny. Before we move on to power forward, I guess we can touch on him there too. I'll just slide over. What are your thoughts on Tatum? Are you looking at him as a priority just because possibly no Jalen and, LeBron probably and or Giannis garnering a lot of ownership? Do you think he's a guy you want to build around?
No, I mean, it depends on Brown. Like as of now, Brown projected in. I'm not getting to Tatum at all. Not a good matchup against Minnesota and all that stuff. So not a priority. If Brown is out, obviously that changes. But if it's a full strength Celtics team, I'm not super interested.
Yep, fair. All right, over at power forward, Giannis leads away.
One more thing. We should also like Max Christie, just because the Lakers have guys missing, Max Christie might play a few more minutes and be okay. But they have Finney Smith now, so that's not even a guarantee.
That's true. Could be just a mess down there, to be honest. All right, Giannis leads away. Best projection at Slate, 63.79 per your projections. 11.4K. He's not cheap, but honestly, for who he is and for the slate, that feels like a really nice price. And the Nets are not a tough matchup. They're just middle of the road when it comes to preventing fast break points. And when it comes to limiting people inside, it's not a scary matchup whatsoever. So yeah, I don't have any qualms building around Giannis. I think the only issue will be, is there enough value on this slate to comfortably fit him and LeBron, or are we just picking, LeBron over Giannis and taking the discount and just building a better, more complete lineup? Right now, I find it a little bit hard to not play Giannis, especially if this ownership is going to be true at 16 to 20%. I don't know if I believe that, but Giannis looks really, really good. There's obviously the blowout risk, and there are other studs that are a little bit cheaper, but he looks awesome. LeBron, we talked about, his projection is going to spike considerably with Anthony Davis likely out. So he looks awesome. Significant savings as a pivot away from Giannis if you want to. There's also other good guys here. Jalen Williams at 8.6. Probably the only other guy that I'd really feel good about paying up for at power forward. I'd probably rank them Giannis, LeBron, Jalen. And then we already talked about Denny there. And if we want to save some cash, you can go all the way down to Naz Reid at 4.5K, 30 minutes in his last game, and he's just always involved off the bench with a good per minute rate and a nice usage rate.
Yeah, I assume LeBron's going to be the chalk here now, and Giannis is going to kind of slip through the cracks potentially a little bit. It's a 6-game slate, so it's not like Giannis is going to be unowned, but could see it happening. LeBron's definitely going to be the chalkier of the two now in that late game, so pairing them is interesting. If it's doable, we'll see what other value opens up. There's still questionable tags to be sorted through out there, so we'll see. But, they're clearly the top two plays at the position. Avdia as well, if you factor in the salary. I like the Naz Reid call. He's cheap. He's good per minute. He always kind of pops for me. If you're looking for a true punt, I think Nikola Jovic is okay. He's played at least 30 minutes in each of the last 2 games, but Jimmy being back might impact that a bit. He's still cheap enough to where I think you can look his way. Derek Jones Jr., kind of the same thing. Kuminga and Wiggins look better if Curry's out. Caleb Martin, not super psyched about that. I think we can probably move right along.
Yeah, I think Caleb, if there's no Embiid, Yabusele and Caleb are okay. I don't have a problem with those guys if no Embiid's in. But with Embiid probably back, not really feeling that. So I just kind of winged a lineup build here with Giannis and LeBron. I don't think it's very doable right now. Even if we got more value, I feel like it's stretching yourself very, very thin. And that's because you can't fit in like Austin Reeves there too. So I think what's going to end up happening is you certainly probably want to just pick between Giannis and LeBron. or you pair them and you don't play Austin Reeves. So fading either Reeves or LeBron probably is an advantageous play. It's probably a good strategical move. Obviously, it could backfire. They're going to be chalky. It's a very good matchup. They have massive roles. But if they're both going to be very owned, it makes sense to just take a stand, maybe make a rule where you only play one of them. And then if you want Giannis, you go get Giannis and pair with one of them and fade the other guy. And then that is doable. There's enough value out there where that's not stretching yourself too thin to go that way. That's probably what I'm going to do, because if Giannis is going to be remotely overlooked, that's very appealing on a smaller slate. I just don't know yet. I'm willing to admit I don't know yet which Laker I will be fading. Reeves is obviously the better value. He's been in fantastic form, and he makes for a more comfortable build. Like the rest of my lineup is going to look better if I choose Reeves over LeBron. And at power forward, like you said, not really much else. Are you paying for Kuminga at 6K at this point?
I mentioned him and Wiggins if Curry is out would be more appealing, but as of now, they're kind of secondary options.
Yeah, I guess if Curry was out, then Schroeder would look really, really good at 5K because Podziemski is out. Gary Payton II is out. Even Draymond's questionable, I think. Oh, he's probable. So yeah, if Curry is out, then I would be interested in going to Schroeder at 5K for sure, because the usage rate would definitely pop. So if Curry's in, I just think Schroeder is kind of like going PG-13 route. He's kind of like deferring. He's not really being that aggressive. So if that is the case, then I'm not super high on him at 5K, even though he's a fine try at that price. But if Curry's out, he looks like a core play, to be honest. All right, let's go over to center. Giannis leads the way there. Anthony Davis is not, just ignore this. Anthony Davis is probably not going to play. Obviously, if Anthony Davis did play at 10.7K against the Blazers, he has the second best projection of the slate. He would look good. It just doesn't sound like he's going to play. Joel Embiid should be back. He is a good price with a solid projection. Should feast on the Warriors down low. Don't really know if he's a priority here. I think I'm mostly just dancing between Giannis and LeBron up top, personally, but he is fine. There's nothing wrong with him. Decent mid-range guys. Isaiah Hartenstein looks good at 7.6K. Julius Randle's okay, but I would definitely prefer Hartenstein. Bam is fine at 8.4. Again, I'd prefer Hartenstein. Zubac is a good price at 7.6. I'd probably just be going between him and Hartenstein if I'm going to drop down to that tier. DeAndre Ayton at 6.3K does look like a pretty good value, especially with no Anthony Davis to contend with. And then Trace Jackson Davis looks like a really, really good value, a core play for me on the slate at 4.7K. And yeah, I don't see anybody else that really pops here. How about you?
The other name I would throw out there is Jackson Hayes. I just assume he's going to start. He's 4K flat, historically pretty good per minute, and the matchup is excellent against Portland. So I think Jackson Davis might be the chalkier, cheap center, but Jackson Hayes might kind of nudge into that a little bit. And then Ayton on the other side of that game, no AD, 6,300 on DK is super cheap for him. In theory, he's going to get every rebound in this game against a Lakers team that is going to play small or have Jackson Hayes in there. So I love that. The Portland Lakers game is just like easily the highlight of the slate. And I think the thing that's going to win it for you is if you nail the pieces that aren't from that game, because everyone's going to play this game. The plays are very obvious. You can stack other games and just be naturally different, but it's very hard to avoid the value here because it's outstanding on both teams now.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the circle game of the slate. Here's the reality. Every other game either looks gross or has major blowout risk. Boston at Minnesota, no. Indiana at Miami, no. Nets like 14 or 13 point spread. Clippers at Thunder with possibly no Harden. All of this sounds really gross. So I think loading up and eating the Lakers, Blazers chalk, and maybe even finding some pieces like Ayton or Hayes that maybe might go a little bit overlooked, possibly, that is the way to go for sure. That's exactly where I will be living on this slate. And that kind of brings me back to the point, like I'll eat a bunch of that chalk. And then if nobody's going to be on Giannis for whatever reason, I'll pay for him instead of LeBron or Austin Reeves and just hope that, I just hope that I make the right call on which guy to fade in that sense. Okay, so let's wrap things up with our flag plant of the slate and our general strategy, even though I think we kind of touched on it.
Yeah. It's kind of complicated now. I do think Giannis is a really good play, like you said, for the reasons you said. Just going to go overlooked now without with this Lakers stuff and the Portland stuff and all that. So I think Giannis is a logical play. Obviously, everything else is essentially Portland and the Lakers. Just be careful about the way you build that. Like if you have 4 Blazers and 3 Lakers or something, that's probably not going to be different enough to win you anything of note. So just be aware of what you're doing when you're building teams with or lineups with a bunch of players from those teams.
Yeah. At the same time, it's like a bit of a dance, right? You don't want to factor in ownership too much because everybody else is going to be looking at the same things you are, and they're going to be trying to adjust based off of that ownership, right? So it's just like, I think you just have to go out of your way in 1 or 2 spots to make sure you're getting different. Right now, it looks like playing Giannis instead of LeBron is going to be pretty different on this slate. And if that actually is going to hold and be the case, that's my flag plant. And I would rather have Giannis than LeBron James on this slate. Because I just feel like the way he's been playing and his price, like Austin Reeves is just a way better chalk play than LeBron right now. Not to say LeBron's a bad play. LeBron without AD at 9.9K against the Blazers, that looks really, really good. And it's going to be tough to fade. Now, if you start going and looking at guys like Hayes, and maybe you fade Reeves and find somebody else you like a little bit under him, you could still pair Giannis and LeBron. I think just right now, my strategy is to pair Giannis and Reeves and fade LeBron. Feels bad. Feels really bad, but that's where I'm at. All right. Hopefully this helps you out. If it does, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.